Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. By now, everybody knows that Donald Trump is paying back the political contributions that he got from the Israel lobby in the form of taking care of one of their long-dreamt-of plans, which is to knock off the regime in Iran. As a result, early yesterday morning in an Austin bar, a gunman wearing clothes with an Iranian flag design and the words "Property of Allah" on it used both a pistol and a rifle to carry out an attack that killed 2 people and wounded 14. Police in Austin shot and killed the gunman. The FBI is investigating the shooting as a potential act of terrorism since it happened the day after the U.S. and Israel launched their attack on Iran. The gunman has been identified, and according to the Department of Homeland Security, he was 53-year-old Ndiaga Diagne. Diagne was originally from Senegal, and he first entered the U.S. in 2000 on a tourist visa. But obviously he had no plans whatsoever to return to Senegal because he became a lawful permanent resident 6 years later after he married a U.S. citizen. He then became a naturalized U.S. citizen in 2013. Obviously, he's remained in the United States ever since. And this is what he's been doing during his time here. Apparently, this is what he thinks is important to him. Far as I'm concerned, this incident is off-code as hell, not merely because we have this foreign flag doing this, but because this foreign flag went on a shooting rampage on behalf of, well, another foreign flag that he's not even a citizen of. Senegal has all kinds of problems, such as the Arabs who are spreading their influence in the continent and pitting Africans against each other. But apparently this Diagne character doesn't have any smoke or fire on behalf of his own people. But it turns out that if the U.S. starts a war against an Arab country, suddenly he's going on the warpath, and all in the name of religion. He has no smoke for black people being mistreated anywhere. He got here in 2000, so that meant that this guy was here for 20 years. He saw all of the mistreatment of black folks right here in this country, the very black people who made it possible for him to be here. He saw the uprisings in 2020, but apparently that didn't make much of an impression on him, far as he was concerned. He ain't one of the, "I'm not one of these akatas. I came here to see what I could get." That didn't bother him, but an Arab country comes under fire, an Arab country that did absolutely nothing for him, and now he's so eager to make a big religious statement. Now, for any of the non-FBA family who may be listening to this, the point that I'm trying to make is this is the reason why we had to delineate. We are facing life and death issues here, and we got a whole bunch of people who have been coming here for decades, generations in fact, and this is the stuff that they're on. These tethers and foreign flags, they worship their white and Arab colonizers. Even after so-called independence, their non-black masters still have them on strings. They're willing to die and even kill to impress these other people. The only thing the rest of the world sees when it looks at people like Diagne is that he's black. That's certainly the only thing the Arabs see. They don't see a Muslim. Blackness is what the world sees when it looks at him, but that's why the cops didn't even attempt to take him in alive. Had he been white, they would have. But he saw himself as a Muslim. Even though the Iranians wouldn't spit on him to save his life, he could never get into one of their mosques. This incident wasn't some bold act of self-respect. It was a blatant act of self-contempt. He immolated himself for absolutely no reason whatsoever. He didn't know or care what he was. He only knew what he wanted to be. In this case, he wanted to be an Arab. Whatever's going on over there in the Middle East, it has nothing to do with us, so I'm not taking any sides. Sure, we can observe, we can give analyses, and we can explain why it's happening. But as far as we're going to take a side and say who's right and who's wrong, this is just another argument among the same gang of thugs we've had to contend with over which one of them is going to be barking out orders and who's going to be taking them. But this is why delineating from these fools was a great move. We have spent hundreds of years pushing black empowerment and black unity. But the problem is too many of these immigrants have come here and the only thing on their minds is how do they prove that they can get in good with the dominant society here or that they can prove their loyalty to some other regime outside of the U.S. This is why delineating was necessary. These people have proven that they're willing to fight for anything except themselves. And they'll make all kinds of excuses why this cowardice is okay, we don't have enough numbers, etc. And yet, whenever they talk to foundational black Americans, they have no problem talking to us any old kind of way. Suddenly, they're not scared of inferior numbers. And let someone offend the white society that they wish they could be a part of. Let them do something against the religion or sexual orientation or immigrants or what have you. And suddenly these same people who tell us why they can't lift a finger or won't say a peep for blackness, suddenly they're hanging out of a window and committing mass shootings. And for what? You know, if you want me to have any sort of consideration for the Iranians have had decades to show consideration for us. I'm not talking about with words. I am not going to be putting myself out for anybody else who decides that all they can do is give us empty lip service once every blue moon or whenever the U.S. needs to be given a black eye or shown what for. No. If these people don't make it a serious point to make serious inroads with us, well then, times like this, they're on their own. And while we're on the subject of felonious foreign flags, that brings me to another incident, this one out of Ron DeSantis' Florida.
This alleged crime happened in June, but it wasn't until this week a grand jury said these minors need to be charged as adults. This is why we are showing you their faces. Now, the details in this alleged crime are very disturbing. We want to warn you. 2 middle school age boys and a 15-year-old boy are facing serious charges as adults in connection to a rape case involving a 12-year-old girl.
So you're 12 years old? You're 13 years old?
Police say the co-defendants, Nelson Nunez, Josiah Jones, and Xavier Tyson, all played a part in the crime that took place in an Overtown community garden in June.
You were indicted by a grand jury and transferred to from juvenile court to adult court. That's why you are here.
Police reports say the victim was leaving her friend's house when 13-year-old Nelson Nunez grabbed her, forced her on a couch inside the Greenhaven Community Garden, and raped her, while 12-year-old Josiah Jones and Xavier Tyson, who was 14 at the time, restrained her. Police say Jones put rocks in her mouth to stop her from screaming. The victim says it went on for about 30 minutes, and the boys stopped when they heard her father calling her name. Both the 12 and 13-year-old are at the West Detention Center, both of them being held there without bond.
Oh, how very different the white media's coverage is this time around. The children who have been charged are between the ages of 12 and 15. They're not adults. The white media never shows the faces of white children who are charged as adults, and yet in this case, they're giving themselves an excuse to make an exception. Well, they were charged as adults, so that makes it okay. Yeah, they pick and choose when they want to do it. Now, I just told you about a case on Friday of a creep who was 18 years old, and yet he raped a 13-year-old girl, basically the same age as this alleged victim in this case. And yet this 18-year-old man has gotten virtually no white media coverage. And he's not being charged with rape. He's simply being charged with travel with intent to engage in illicit sexual conduct. Not rape, not sexual assault, just intent to engage in behavior. This for a man who raped a child and strangled her nearly to death. And it seemed to be part of his plan that both of them were going to die afterwards. But from the way he set it up, she was going to die whether she wanted to or not. And of course, we have to ask, who are these defendants? Well, this took place in Miami, so I'm already starting to think that it's not an FBA enclave. And then you look at the names. Nelson Nunez, Josiah Jones. I've seen black males named Josiah, but never Josiah. So, at first blush at least, it looks like we have a number of non-FBA identicators going on here. Now, I mention this because whenever you got these tethers or whomever who try to tell us that foundational black Americans don't know how to raise our children, from now on, we're going to be keeping a running tally of whose kids are getting into what trouble. And what we've already been uncovering is that a lot of these criminals who had previously been put under the blanket definition of black are in fact immigrants. Foundational black Americans will not be carrying the weight of all these immigrants who commit these crimes the same way that we're not going to be putting on the cape for other groups either. Everyone's going to need to learn to stand up for themselves on their own, or they will fall where they cower. And I know this last part is not exactly a natural segue, but we talked about the recent predictable problems the Tethers had after TetherCon in New Orleans last year. And speaking of New Orleans, they had Mardi Gras last month, an FBA tradition. Now, a lot of foreign flags want to try to attribute Caribbean and Latin culture to Mardi Gras as if it has nothing to do with FBAs whatsoever. They say that it's basically an Americanized version of Carnival in places like Brazil. I'm afraid that doesn't track. The differences between what FBAs do and what they do in places like Brazil are as stark as night and day. For example, in New Orleans, they do dress up in elaborate feathery costumes, kind of like they do in Latin America, but you notice a huge difference. They're covered from head to toe. You see, this is how foundational black Americans dress when they do this. Now compare that, on the other hand, to how the women in Brazil dress for Carnival. Pay attention to how the foundational black Americans dress during Mardi Gras. You will not see an FBA black woman dress like this. And you damn sure won't see any FBA men at Mardi Gras dressed like this. I'm just saying. I thought the entire point of the feather costumes was to take on the attributes of a bird. You're supposed to be covered from head to toe. Whoever saw a bird that only had feathers on its shoulders? Now again, I'm not trying to be messy, but I gotta tell it like it is, and this is something I noticed a long time ago, and I'm sure a lot of you noticed it too. The pornification of hip-hop was not something that organically came from foundational black Americans who created rap music. This was the result of foreign influence. People like the Caribbean Tether Luther Campbell and others. In places like the Caribbean and Latin America, having women running around naked is the norm. Sexualizing women is a part of the culture. Obviously, I'm not saying that that's the only thing that these cultures were doing, but what I'm pointing out is we were not doing this. Because when you encourage open nudity and debauchery in the streets, you turn your society into an open-air brothel. When you glorify women being the worst version of themselves, the children will follow, and society deteriorates. You make your daughters into whores, and as the old saying goes, you can't make a whore into a housewife. And you certainly can't make a whore into a responsible mother either. Just because people have a parade in one country where some of them wear feathers or some sort of other elaborate dress, that doesn't mean they're doing the same thing that folks in another country do. And how you do something matters just as much as what you're doing. For the Pan-Africanists out there getting heartburn about what I'm saying, give it a rest. It takes two to tango, and you're out here square dancing solo. Pan-Africanism wasn't necessarily stillborn, but it damn sure was on life support for many years. And here some folks are still trying to breathe life back into it. Tell me something. At what point does this stop being CPR and it becomes necrophilia? That's not a joke. It's a serious question, because that's what's happening here. Pan-Africanism needed to be a two-way street, and all it ever was a one-way road. We were the ones who wanted it. All those other African countries over there, and not a single one, not even one, got on board with us. And neither did their people. Sure, you have a small minority who did, but Africa is not a few open-minded people with their heads on straight. It's a continent full of people. This was a fundamental imbalance, and the more people who came here from abroad who continue to spit in our faces and to work against us and to promote being an immigrant over being black and who wanted to practice the same stupid tribalism that made Africa into a basket case, these people never stopped that mess. That's what this latest guy in Austin proved to us. 100 years of that. When does it stop? When do we say enough? That's when. There's an old saying, if something can't go on forever, it won't. Without us, there is no soul. That's not a brag, it's a fact. That's why the word is so important to us. We are the soul. We are the cultural vibrancy. And without a soul, the body dies. And what do you call a body without a soul? You call it a zombie. Without us, that's what Essence Fest turned into. You can monetize what we do, but you can't do what we do. You can't create it. And there is no substitute for it. Now, people can get upset about what it is that I'm saying, but unless they're out here calling this mess out and calling it what it is, then they have no leg to stand on. This is not about trying to make sure that everybody's perfectly pleased with us. In order for that to happen, we would have to also make sure that the tethers, bootlicks, foreign flags, and other assorted enemies within like us. And if they do, that means we're doing it wrong. Because you will never see a foundational black American calling himself doing some sort of stunt because he's trying to impress people in a different country that he's never set foot in, people who have no respect for him in the first place. And anyone who doesn't understand that has never understood us. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Gwendolyn Langston, Ikegas Dorset, Terrence Pitts, Miss Ridgway, and Ronald Williams. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.